Okay, Danny, thank you so much for coming by today. You've got an announcement. So we said when you were on last time, we were going to make this an annual thing, and you're group media director at Noble People, but things have changed. So let's start with the announcement first.
That's like when the Bachelor host does like, this is the most dramatic season yet. That was very good. That was like a great reveal. Yeah. So well, first of all, Victor, thanks for having me back. I think I saw you're at is this episode 116?
This will be either 116 or 117, depending on where
That's
it goes in the
amazing.
queue. So
That's amazing. As someone who, knows how hard it is to keep up with a newsletter or a podcast, it's a testament to you and all the guests you've had. So thanks for having me back. But yeah, like you said, I am with a partner of mine. His name is Barry. I'll be getting into that throughout the interview. We're starting our own media agency. So we're starting an agency. We've started that agency, and it's called Obsessed Media. I got the swag already for those at home. It's one of two, limited edition. But yeah, we're super excited, and I'm excited to get into that with you, Victor, today.
okay, so let's go back to the beginning of this. I have a lot of friends who work in the agency world, and I want to say about 99% of them have kicked around the idea of going out on their own and starting their own agency. Is it safe to say that for most of your career, you were doing the same thing as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, myself, I come from a family. My parents are both entrepreneurs. Barry, who's my partner in this, his parents are entrepreneurs. So I think we always had that entrepreneurial spirit and that want to do something on our own with our names on the door and make sure that, we left a mark in the space and the industry that we were in. So I think throughout my career, I've always had an eye on picking up details, picking up ways of doing things, picking up processes for how great leaders and agency leaders went about their business, while also keeping an eye on how do I make myself the best marketer, the best media planner, the best media buyer that I could be. And I've learned from a lot of great people over the years to do that. So I think with all of that, both Barry and I, as we connected at Noble People, which is the last agency we came from, we just had an eye towards doing that, towards crafting something and taking all that great knowledge and being able to combine it and start something of our own. So it was always in the background. I know Barry very much so, definitely wanted to learn more about agency operations and leading an agency. He was the president of Noble People. And so that experience is definitely going to guide him through this next chapter with our new venture. So it was there from the beginning. Definitely picked up, I would say, since I met Barry over, and when we really cemented this thing. But that seed was always there.
At what point did you guys decide to move forward with this? Like it went from, like you said, you alluded to aspirational to let's legitimize this and
Yeah.
sew it up.
It's a great question. Yesterday. No, I'm kidding. So
You guys move fast.
exactly. Well, that we'll get back to that because that is something that I think we are going to do in our new venture and something that we see as an opportunity in the media agency world and just media and marketing in general. But Barry hired me at Noble People, the last agency we came from. We were both there for quite some time. We found instantly a connection in working together. I think the teams that we were on together, we always found that we were able to get to an answer and a thoughtful answer faster, quicker. And we saw that bore out with the clients we worked on, the results that we got from the campaigns we activated on. And over the years, it was just an amazing experience working together, teaming up and working on a variety of clients, categories, projects, to the point where we were winning new business together. We were retaining old business together. We were making clients happy together. And it was a really awesome experience to have that. I can't tell you there was we were out at drinks that Thursday night in 2000, whatever. And we're like, well, you too, you want to start an agency? But it probably came up over the years. We became close friends just from working together so closely. And, just one thing led to another. I think the best way to put it is we had talked about it here and there for a bit. It always felt like something that, to your point, and the other people you'd spoken to, maybe this is aspirational. Oh, this would be a really cool thing if we could really pull it off. Barry had and his wife had children. My wife and I had a baby that we talked about the last time I was on this show. And the timing never kind of felt right to fully explore it. But I would say towards the end of last year, that's when things really sped up. That's when things really cemented. And we were like, let's just go for it because we feel like we have a unique POV and we want to share that with the market.
What is that unique POV? Because we're going to get into how outspoken you are on LinkedIn, and I absolutely love your posts. And people can fact check me on that because I hit the like button all the time when your stuff comes up. But what is your what is the POV like? What problem did you guys see that you felt the two of you could solve if you teamed up and started your own agency?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest thing is we've already aligned on what we want our values to be at this new agency. And I think the biggest operating principle we have is be quick but thoughtful.
Mm.
And what we think is going on in the media industry right now is you have two types of companies or agencies that you work with. They're either fast but shallow or slow but thoughtful. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to fast but shallow, um, I think we're always going to be under pressure, especially in 2025, to hit deadlines faster, to work within budgets that might be smaller than we want. I think AI, corporate pressure, all those things are breathing down the neck of marketers everywhere. And one answer to that is just speed, right? Got to be as quick as possible to get campaigns in the world, to get work out there. But what comes with that is a lot of rinse and repeat answers, a lot of easy ways to spend money that might lead to waste, or at worst, honestly, average results, because everyone's hitting the same Facebook and Google buttons. Everyone's doing the same channels because it's so quick to activate in those places. But on the flip side, I think when you start to see companies get really thoughtful about media or really marketing in general, they take 4 weeks to deliver a strategy, and they take another 6 weeks to deliver a media plan. Then they go back and forth with feedback and execution. And before you know it, quarters, months have passed, and that problem hasn't been solved yet. And that's not appropriate. That's not possible for CMOs that are only in the driver's seat for 3 years on average, maybe less. And so what you get with really thoughtful answers is a lack of speed. And so what we think we can bring to the market is thoughtful yet quick answers. And our belief is you're able to do that for a couple of reasons. One is we both have integrated experience. We've worked on brand marketing campaigns. We've worked inside the walls of performance marketing campaigns. We've worked with clients of various different sizes. And so we bring that expertise that can see the forest from the trees and then get it within the forest to really play that analogy out if we need to and when it's appropriate.
So you
But
saw
yeah,
media getting heavily commoditized, if I understand. And I even remember that
yeah,
you had put up a LinkedIn post. I'm going to go back a year or so, where you were critical of people in the industry who would be like, "This is what we did in Q4 last year. We're going to do the exact same thing in Q4 this year."
right. Yes, I think that is a problem, and I feel for companies that need to deliver that quickly because it's hard to go back to the drawing board, and it also sometimes doesn't make sense to not expand on what has worked already. But things are just too fast moving. Challenges are too complex to really rely on your last answer as the golden one or as the one to move forward with. And so I completely agree with that. The other thing I was going to say too is we really believe in senior experts. I think, in my opinion, experience is data. That is data you can't get anywhere else but the experience that you have and the judgment that you've had over the years. And I think that is
Put that
something
on a t-shirt.
exactly
You
right.
should. That should be the
I'll
back
mail,
of your t-shirt,
I'll mail
literally.
that to you. Yeah, exactly. So I think that is something that, Barry and I were talking about this the other day. And, when I was 24, 25 years old, I was in charge of whatever it was, $25, $50 million in media. And that's a lot of money to be responsible for. And it's kind of insane to think of that in hindsight. And that's no disrespect to young people in the industry. In fact, Barry and I have had years coaching up those people and making sure that they felt empowered to not only plan media, but also do it in a thoughtful and quick way. But a lot of companies don't want their biggest P&L or their biggest line item on the P&L to be managed by people without that experience to move fast but thoughtful. And so I think those are two things that we'll bring to the equation moving forward.
Let's take a step back and let's talk about the name Obsessed. Where does it come from?
Um, well, it's funny. I have a Post-it right next to me that says "Talk Slow," because when we did this last time, I'm someone who listens to my podcast on 1.5 speed because I'm a nut, and I
Mm.
think that is actually I think when we think about obsessed, it's inherent to me and Barry and I's DNA. We go deep. We're in it with our partners, ourselves. We like to uncover every nook and cranny when it comes to planning, marketing, and media, but also staying current with the industry. And so I could talk really fast about that stuff too because I get so excited and passionate. But passion is such a huge part of that. I think a lot of media companies that clients work with don't have that obsessive nature. to use media in a way that empowers their business, to strive for better media, both from a quality and an efficiency standpoint. And I think even when I was preparing for this podcast, I found myself getting obsessed, like going down rabbit holes of different articles and media trends and marketing landscape insights. And so I think that is what we are all about. We are people that are obsessed with better media on behalf of clients and solving their business challenges. And so that is why we put it on a t-shirt. That's why I'm wearing that sweatshirt. That's why we made it the name of the agency, because we want it to be core to the agency that we are obsessed with better media and using it for the good of our clients.
What was the conversation like with your wife? Because you mentioned that you just had a daughter, and I believe your daughter is what, 18 months old?
Yeah, she's almost a year and a half. Yeah.
A year and a half. So you're at this point where you're saying to your wife, I've got this idea. It could pay off for us really well in the long run, but there's going to be some potential short-term financial pain. How does that conversation go?
I feel like I've said it's a great question, because it is, Victor. These are great questions. And,
This is the stuff people don't really talk about when it comes to these nuances. They'll talk about, hey, we've got this logo, we've got this company, here's what we're going to do. But it's like, I think there's a lot of value in trying to understand what went on in the background to get to where you were.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm riding a high a little bit coming into this podcast, because my daughter just started walking this weekend. She took her first steps, so that was
congratulations!
Almost like symbolic of the first steps of her life, my new company. But it's been a joy to be a father. I've loved every second of it, except for the first 3 months. Those are terrible. Anyone who tells you otherwise, they don't know who you are for like 3 months. It's a very strange experience. But look, my wife herself is an entrepreneur. Lexi is a producer and a partner of a production company with 2 others, and she has almost been my inspiration to see that someone can do it, can kind of seize their passion, turn it into a career, have that flexibility and that freedom, like you said, but more than that, stamp their POV and what they believe in within their career on a company, and use that to really blaze their own path. And so I think for other people, it might be a more difficult, I don't know if difficult's the right word, but a different conversation. But for Lexi and I, it made a lot of sense from the get-go, just because she has had a positive experience and she's had that career trajectory already from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Now, there's been logistics we've had to figure out. The stuff they don't talk about, to your point, when it comes to benefits, when it comes to, projecting for the future and making sure that we, are setting ourselves up for success, our daughter up for success. And, those are scary conversations for, myself and our family. I think what makes it really exciting, though, is we're both so passionate about what we do. We're both obsessed about what we do. And I think we are both so excited for that future for both of ourselves and collectively together.
What about some of the operational things that it takes to build an agency? So you mentioned already benefits. Is it fun for you to sort through that sort of stuff, like on an operational level? Like, what about invoice software, getting the bank accounts set up and everything like that?
Yeah, I'm excited. If I'm being totally honest, I think it takes a different level of gravity when it's you operating the business. And I think you take a different level of interest, curiosity, and excitement when it's your responsibility to pull those things off, because if you do it, you will directly benefit from it. Now, Barry, like I said, has had an immense amount of experience operating our last agency and just agencies in general from an operational standpoint. And he's been a great guide for me. But when it comes to that stuff, I feel like it's easier to be passionate about it and dive in because of that. And because we know that if we pull this off right, from the most interesting and sexiest things to the most basic and redundant things, it'll speak volumes about, those principles I talked about before, which are, and just to list them out, it's be quick but thoughtful. Don't take too long to do the invoicing stuff, but make sure it's quality and right. We have another one that's treat it like it's your own. That's going to be a principle that we follow with our clients, which I think comes from being in the trenches, being an extension of, different marketing teams and really helping those teams fill those gaps when they encounter new problems or challenges when they're up against them. And the last one is make shit fun. And shit is intentional in that, because sometimes in this industry, you could deal with situations that are uncomfortable, or even in building this company, like you said, you do something you've never done before, or it's a sticky situation, but it's all about making it fun. It's all about making it inspiring or exciting, because that helps you pull it off.
Are you and Barry the only two employees at the time of launch, or do you guys have others?
Only 2 employees. Now we are, like I said, we've seen a lot of different categories, a lot of different clients, and being a senior expert is going to be core to our offering. We're rounding out our network in terms of different people and different mentors that we can rely on. But in terms of the employees of the company, it'll be Barry and myself, and we're really excited to dive in and do this together.
I like what you're saying about having, I mean, senior level experience and having that and kind of in the weeds. There's something in sales. So, in case anyone's watching this first time wondering what I do, I'm in media and ad tech sales. And there's this term called player coach, where you still are leading as a coach, but you're also a player as well. And it makes you a lot more empathetic. It sounds like that's the route you're going for as well. Like, do you feel that you're still going to continue to do that as the agency grows? Like, let's say we're doing this podcast a year from now and you've got 20 people on the team. Do you still find that you're going to be on the weeds, and how deep would you still get, like within the planning stage or the strategy stage?
Yeah, I think get me to 20 people. That's amazing. 20 people. Come on down. I think that when I was in my last role or previous roles, I think that player coach analogy really resonates because I found myself increasingly coaching versus playing. And I felt that it was a muscle that I was building, that I will continue to build over the course of my career, but I want to keep playing. And I think a lot of clients pay their agencies to have their people play and get in the weeds with them. And so that is a reason why I'm really excited and have been really excited to start this company with Barry. I like to say that, I feel like an expert again in some ways. I'm getting into it and in the weeds again, a bit more probably than I had been in the past. And it's exciting and it's re-energizing. So, I think we have no immediate plans to scale to that size. I think I'll always be front and center with clients. I'll always be front and center and in it with the employees of the company. And I'll always be in it because I think that's really important. Moving forward, this is Barry and I's company, and we want to be able to add as much value as possible within the operations of the company and also the day-to-day projects. So to your point, yes, I do see myself, and I think Barry would say this too, making sure that our voice is felt, our presence is felt no matter what, and no matter how big we get in the future.
So a buddy of mine, Matt Manouge, was on the podcast a little while back, and he's the founder and creative director of Table 9 Productions up here in Canada. And the interesting thing about the title he has at Table 9 is not only is he the founder, but he's also the creative director. And that's because he wanted to stay involved within the creative process. He found it it's a little difficult where you go to school to be a creative, you want to create, and we're talking about video production and producing and all that sort of jazz and directing. And then all of a sudden you start your own company and then you get away from the toys that you got to play with. And then that's why he kept creative director in his title, because he wanted to emphasize that he's still going to be part of the production process and the creating process. And I'm getting a sense that that's the case with you as well in media, that you want to still play in the strategy and planning space.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And I think that is something that, I've joked with, Barry about what our titles are. And maybe even by the time this podcast releases, we have formal titles. But originally I was like, maybe I'll just be like Chief something something. And, whatever you want. And almost to not make, a bit to make a mockery of all these crazy titles you see at different agencies of like, you never know who does what, to be honest, because everyone has such a long title, or the longer the title, the less they do kind of thing. It's probably true in most agencies, but I'm in it. When you buy Obsessed Media, you buy Barry and I. And I think that to your point about coaching, look, I think coaching's important. I think empowering people is important, and something that I was able to do in my last role as head of planning at Noble People and throughout other stints of my career. But it was never as fulfilling as working hand in hand with clients. And that's just the truth. And for other people, it might be different. And I think that is something that was really well said by the guest you mentioned, because we want to keep creating. We don't want to complain. We want to create. And so this was a way for us to do that.
And so I imagine if you guys are launching, or you've already launched, you've got a couple of clients already on your roster.
Yeah, and we have already launched. So we've been at this for a few months now. We can't name clients, but I could say we have a few. And we're working with a protein bar brand. We're working with a couple others, have had some also really good conversations overall. And we're really excited. What we're seeing, I think so far we feel validated that what we can bring to market is what people are looking for, whether it be from positive conversations or for the work we're doing for current clients. We're excited about the response so far.
And in your previous role at Noble People, were you doing a lot of new client pitches?
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, a lot of this stemmed from, or some of it stemmed from Barry and I's ability to bring in new business. And so I know it's a horse of a different color when you work at an agency. It's one thing to work on your client team, which has always been a rewarding experience for me. There's no feeling quite like winning a new business pitch. When you go in there, you get a fresh new problem. Some of the best work happens because, you only have so much time to think about it and you only have so much information at your disposal. So you have to be, really come at it from a raw perspective. Barry and I were a great team. Typically, I think what would take other teams, multiple days or multiple weeks, we were able to get to in multiple hours, and we were successful in winning quite a few new business pitches. So it was a really cool experience to see that, because it also validated, okay, we could be a team that goes to market together with people we hadn't met before and show them the quality of our thinking and the ability to, sway them that we could influence their marketing operation.
So you go in and you talk to a client for the first time. What is that shtick? Because some people will look at agencies and think that they might be highly commoditized. And I mean this in an absolute sincere way, because I work with a bunch of agencies and you see things like their programmatic team works with Google and it also works with the trade desk. And then it's like you said as well, too, is that you've got people are working with Meta. They're working with some of the major broadcasters in the same out of home channels as well, too. So if someone sits down with you and Barry, what is that kind of elevator pitch or that unique selling proposition about Obsessed?
Yeah. And I think that, well, to keep coming back to it, it starts with the people. It is Barry and myself. I think everyone who's worked with an agency can empathize with seeing one team from a new business perspective, and then you see a completely different team from a real business perspective. And so that is something that I think that we offer, is that the people you see on Zoom for that first meeting, guess what? They're showing up to round 2 and round 3 with you. You're not going to just see Joe or Bobby out of the gate, or whoever it may be. But I think what really it comes down to, so if you're a brand thinking about like, okay, how could I use Obsessed Media, or when would be the right time to reach out to them? We like to say we're an agency for new. And Barry and I have joked about, maybe 20 years from now, we still say we're a new agency, or we're agency for new. And it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but what it's supposed to mean is there's a lot of brands at an inflection point, especially in 2025. I feel like there's so many macroeconomic and just things at large that are affecting different brands. And we believe, it's all about new growth. There's a lot of way to get that growth. It's new audiences, it's new channels, it's new tactics. It could just be new ways of thinking because you haven't connected with a new partner in quite some time from an agency perspective. And I think a lot of brands, especially over the last couple of years, whether it was COVID era marketing strategies or, different channels that were tried for the first time, what got you started got you stuck. And we're here to help you get unstuck with some new thinking at Obsessed.
And Danny, if anyone watching or listening to this wants to get in touch to learn more about Obsessed, how can they get in touch with you?
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a, hopefully this Danny. So that first part is easy. Danny at obsessed-media.com. The dash will get you, but it's Danny at obsessed-media.com. So, that would be awesome if any listener reaches out, because we would love to keep chatting with whoever has, different challenges that they have and want to explore new opportunities with them.
And mention that you heard about him on this podcast, because attribution is everything now.
Attribution is everything, Victor. And that probably is a good segue into many of the questions you have about some of my recent posts.
Like I love what you say, because like I said in our previous episode, you can get away with saying this because you're on the agency side. You control the media and you control not the media, but you control the budgets. And because people want access to those budgets, they're willing to work with you. They want to drop some knowledge. Whereas I'm on the sales side. If I'm critical of something, I'll never work at that company. So I can't say
you'd be surprised. I appreciate you saying that. I do think that, I've had some people, and I can't name them, but I've put up stuff and they've reached out to me, or they've reached out to people I've worked with. Hey, I can't believe he said that, or he's got to walk that back. And so, it's been interesting to see, putting out stuff and seeing what the response is. I like to say that when we've told people the news about Obsessed, you could tell a lot from someone about the first thing they ask you about. So for example, you might I might tell a colleague about Obsessed or a new person. They ask about, well, how is it being funded? Okay, that person really cares about money. Or how,
Mm.
do you think you will get a lot of creativity will come out of the agency? They care about creativity. Similarly, for what I post on LinkedIn, if someone is very upset about what I posted and they work at the company that I've talked about, I think I've struck some sort of core that whether they've heard it before and they want to address, and I don't have all the details, but sometimes, okay, that is something that I should go deeper on, because it could be meaningful to really dig a bit deeper and see if there is something even more there that I'm not talking about.
Well, last year it was fast channels. We highlighted that one. We're going to go
Yeah.
through a couple. The first one is you had a post about the most index. So give us an idea of what the most index is, because this is your idea. This isn't you commenting on another index that a research company put together. This is your own creation.
Yeah, and so I think first things first is I'm fascinated at the amount of free, publicly available information out there. I think it's so rich, and if you just know where to look, you can get so much information of just what's trending in media just by going to different websites, going to different platforms, and they'll give you the information for free. So what I wanted to do was, I think we all hear about how subcultures are dominating culture today. Attention is so fragmented. It's so hard to reach people because they're in so many different places. There are all these niches that they survive, that a lot of people consume media in. And I just don't know if that's totally true. I still think there's some semblance of a monoculture, or there's still semblance of popular platforms that everyone, or properties that everyone gravitates to. If you look at the top 10 podcasts over the last 10 years, they've rarely changed. I think that's starting to change right now, but for the most part, a lot of the popular names have been in the top 10. The top websites haven't really changed. So there are some things that let's just aggregate all these different top 10 lists from television, from streaming, from Spotify, from YouTube, from websites, from apps, and combine it all together and see what it paints. What's the picture it paints about people's interest today? And I've done it twice. It's been a really awesome experience because it's both highlighted things that I thought were true and reaffirmed them, but also things that I didn't really expect. And it's been really cool to see. And I think it's helped me be a better media planner and buyer, because I know what to look out for in terms of what people are most interested today that I maybe didn't before.
And you've had a couple of really interesting highlights. I think one of the comments you had, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where you said that the places where I don't know if reliable is the right word, we know they reliably are, might be the environments that you don't want to be in. And you highlighted one, true crime podcasts. You want to reach women, true crime podcasts, but that might not be friendly for your brand.
Yeah, I was surprised at the true crime. I think there were a couple of things from a true crime perspective I was surprised in. The first is that I don't know if Hulu is investing in true crime content, but when you look at the top streaming shows, the top 10 right now, two Hulu shows are in the top 10, and both are true crime related or mystery related. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then you have two of the top 10 Spotify podcasts are true crime related. So at first I thought, okay, this is a trend, and this has been documented in the past, that when there is, a climate that's a little unsettled and people are stressed out, horror, true crime, these are genres that start to rise. I think there are research out there that, when there is, economic, unsettlement or political strife, that, more people go to the movies to see horror movies. So I thought it could be something to do with that. It's been a chaotic start to the year for a lot of people. Are people just going at true crime a bit harder? But I think in general with that genre, what it just shows is, as a marketer, I don't know if you're always trying to show up in podcasts where they're talking about death, where they're talking about, sometimes
You
very
don't have to get
gory.
into the gory details, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah,
it's funny
yeah,
because
and
a lot of times in those podcasts, and I don't really listen to them too much, but I have, the victims are women. And it's
yeah.
just kind of weird that it's like they
Right.
they
Here's a
perform
so
so well.
bad.
Yeah,
Or
I
here's
know.
the
They
yeah,
just perform
yeah.
so
And
well with
so
that audience.
yeah, and so there was an article that came out today about the White Lotus and how the Four Seasons struck
Hmm.
gold with this partnership with the White Lotus. And what I thought was really interesting about it, and what the article said, was had the Four Seasons known that a murder was going to take place on their property every season, a lot of hotels would have been like, whoa, slow down. We can't be the hotel associated with murder. We can't be the hotel associated with this type of chicanery that goes on every White Lotus season. But they didn't know that. And it was just during COVID that they decided to, film there. And they were the only hotel in Maui that said yes, because it's COVID and no one is coming to our hotel. And so I just think it's interesting. Like sometimes brands have to have the courage to do the obvious and just accept a good opportunity without thinking, really letting themselves swirl and not take advantage of it. And so I thought that was a really good example too of, recognizing that you could be in this potentially cultural property or HBO prestige show for many years, and not letting, blinders or other factors get in the way.
So do they go to other Four Season hotels? Like,
They do.
so season two, that was a Four Seasons, just like the one in Thailand right now for season
Yeah, it
three?
was in Italy, and then the third season was in Thailand. But there's a Mandarin Oriental, I think, just showcased in the latest episode, and they're going all out. They're like, "Look, check us out in the latest episode of White Lotus." But yeah, they've consistently now been a part of the White Lotus family for, it seems like, 3 seasons.
So why was ESPN right to ditch Major League Baseball?
Yeah, so I've said this before on LinkedIn, but I think every decision or a lot of great decisions in marketing and media come down to reach, attention, and cost. Are you reaching enough of the right people? And are you reaching the right people? And are you reaching enough of them? Are they paying attention to you? And is the juice worth the squeeze when it comes to a cost perspective? And it seems that ESPN felt that MLB was delinquent, at least from a cost perspective, when you stack up the other two. Now, MLB had a good year last year. World Series ratings were up quite a bit. The Yankees and Dodgers were in the World Series, so that really helped. They also saw, not only Sunday Night Baseball saw a slight increase in ratings last year on ESPN, but they saw an increase on 18 to 34-year-olds, which for a TV property like baseball, you would think, wow, that's amazing. Why wouldn't you renew this? And I think what people don't understand is you can't plug an old content or an old strategy to a new audience. And what I mean by that is ESPN is very focused on their new flagship service, their new streaming service. It's going to be coming out, I believe, this year. They also have so much rich data from ESPN Plus of what people watch on that service and from their other digital properties of what they consume from a digital perspective. MLB was on ESPN Plus for many years, but the real driver of ESPN Plus was UFC. And the UFC rights are coming up this year, right? So those rights are about to go from, I believe, $300 million to probably over $1 billion. So when you're ESPN and you're making decisions on what to put on that new streaming service, you might want to save the $500 million from MLB, especially when they're cutting smaller deals with Roku or Apple TV Plus for certain packages, and save that for things that are probably going to move the needle when you go to market with this new flagship service. So, things like WNBA, UFC, those are sports that are probably going to draw on that younger audience to that new flagship service versus baseball. And that's why I think they were right to let it go.
Okay, going back to what you just said there about you can't plug an old thing to a new audience, something that was heavily criticized, and you've got an opinion on it, is the NBA All-Star game. It absolutely floundered. So you've got your marketing cap on. I know you're also a basketball fan. How would you fix it? Or would you even bother to fix it and scrap it all together?
Yeah, I think two things. The first is I think brands are looking so increasingly to own a moment. And, sports are so expensive and cluttered to show up in. So the ability to brand something and take it over and call it your own, especially something with such a rich history like the dunk contest, is such a perfect opportunity to do that. If you're a brand and you're debating, spending $8 million or whatever it is with the match spend, $15, $20 million in the Super Bowl, and throwing that money at players to participate in the dunk contest, why wouldn't you do that? Especially if you're already an existing or presenting sponsor of NBA All-Star Weekend. And you can make that such an event, right? You can not only overpay players to participate in the dunk contest, but you can bring your VIP fans down to the dunk contest to sit courtside. You could have viewing parties if you're a QSR restaurant or a retail location. You can particularly get global stars. The NBA is increasingly global. Get some global stars to participate in the dunk contest if you want to make a mark in different markets. So there's so many different opportunities to save or elevate the dunk contest. Another idea I had was expand it. Just get like TikTokers to come. These kids on TikTok or YouTube that dunk all the time. Lower the rims or something or whatever, or make it like a celebrity contest. Like almost expand the pool beyond NBA players. I think that would resonate. But I think it's such a big opportunity for brands to save something and add value to fans versus just showing up. And I think that's the whole point of marketing for a lot of brands. How do we add value to this experience versus just getting lost in the shuffle? And a lot of these properties, including the NBA dunk contest, just screams for that opportunity.
What do you think of what the NHL did, where they replaced their All-Star weekend with a kind of in-season international tournament?
I think it's awesome. I would love for the NBA to attempt that too and see if it would have the same success. I do think we're in a certain moment with Canada and US that it kind of elevated the stakes a little bit. But that game, I believe, got 9 or 9.5 million viewers, which was, such a huge success for the NHL. And so I thought it was a great way to change it up. Now, I do think that, when you do try things like that, it's not without its warts. I think the in-season tournament for the NBA was really popular to start, and I think they're still figuring out how to optimize that tournament. So I think it's all about experimentation and trying new things. You're never going to get the results you want if you just stay the course, almost similar to what we talked about before. If you just do what everyone else is doing, you can expect average results. I think the point is to experiment, try new things, and see if you can elevate the experience.
So you were a fan of the in-season tournament? Because I was about to bring that up.
I was definitely a fan from the get-go for that first season, for when they first tried it out. I think I was a little skeptical, but it felt like different and it felt interesting in that first year. I do think interest has waned a little bit since.
See, for me, it seemed like kind of a bit of a half-hearted attempt at emulating what they do in Europe with football or soccer. And the reason it works in Europe is that you get teams in different leagues playing each other. You don't have that in the NBA. You're not gonna see a G League team start playing an NBA team, or if they
That's a
really
good
want,
idea, though.
if they wanted to, it may or may not be, or if they wanted to expand it, bring up some professional Latin American teams or European teams. You know what? Maybe we're rewriting literally their all-star strategy right here in this podcast.
Why not?
And you know what? They got to give you guys the media buying rights, and they just got to give me 6%. And we'll have the ticket revenues, and that's it. Because that's what a lot of people like about that in Europe. Did you watch a lot of English Premier League soccer or any?
I don't.
So basically, the way it works is very simple, oversimplified, and for the audience as well, is that you've got different leagues, and you get promotion and relegation. If you want a really good idea of how that works, go watch Welcome to Wrexham on Disney Plus. I think it's on Hulu for you guys, but in Canada it's on Disney Plus, because it literally every season is about Wrexham getting promoted from like the bottom to getting up to the Premier League. But then on top of that, you've also got tournaments like the FA Cup, where it's all of England. And you literally could have Manchester United showing up and playing a very, very, very small team that maybe their stadium seats 5,000 people. Even that still has standing room. And so it gets really interesting, because every once in a while you get giant killers, because here's where it gets really interesting and money gets involved. You've got the managers looking at the team going, do we play our stars or do we play our B team for this game? Because we don't want to get them injured for the games that actually make us proper money around the gate. So it changes things up a little bit. But you know what? If they brought international teams in, I think that would be pretty good in basketball. Look,
I think the fall, and people were commenting about this here. It's actually a good segue to something I wanted to talk to you about, which is, I think a lot of people were commenting that the fall in general is so dominated by football, and it's really hard to stand out until after Christmas, when, and I know even that is becoming something the NFL is trying to cement themselves on when it came to Netflix's Christmas games. But I do think there's a lot of lazy articles or storylines when it comes to this, and I think we spoke about this last time, which is people like to say TV is dead. And Barry and I were joking before, it's been dying since we've been, media planners, by the way. So, but a lot of people like to say, okay, this is the year, it's dead. TV is dead. And then you'll hear people say, well, the NBA ratings are down this year. I think they were down 5% leading into the All-Star break. So the NBA is dead, or the NBA is having a problem. And I just don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say TV is dead, but things that aren't succeeding on TV or succeeding less are dead. And I think that is a big problem in our industry, where it's almost like TV continues to be a yardstick for how leagues and things like the in-season tournament are perceived or seen, but it's just a reflection on TV. If you dig into the ratings data for NBA, it's not so much that NBA ratings are down. I believe TNT ratings are down 13%, and cable penetration is down 14%. So just what you're having is less people are watching cable. A lot of those people watch the NBA. Vis-a-vis, the NBA ratings are down. So one of the things I'm really excited about for 2025 is the NBA returning to NBC. I think that's going to be awesome, not only for the fans, but also for the ratings. I'm really excited for the NBA to be on Amazon and see what kind of innovation that could bring to the league. And so I'm really excited for both those things as I look ahead to the rest of the year.
And by going to NBC, you mean it's going to be on network now? And I guess it's going to be on network, Peacock as well, too?
It'll be on both, but yes, it'll be back on broadcast.
Okay, so let's take a step back to 2024 before we get ahead. What surprised you in 2024? Like, when you look back at something, is there something that you're probably on the fence on that actually panned out a lot better, that gets you excited maybe for 2025? And I'm throwing things out there like you talk a lot about Reddit in your LinkedIn posts, digital out of home, or not necessarily digital at home, but like programmatic out of home, or maybe it's something a little bit more particular, like You mentioned the NFL game on Netflix on Christmas Day, but what about, say, Jake Paul and Mike Tyson? Which, by the
Yeah,
way, I thought that was a bust. I thought the undercard, and I'm sorry that I forget Amanda Nunes and the other boxer, and there's a rematch set for that. That crushed it. Like, I was all over that fight.
yeah, and I know you're a big Formula One guy. Did we talk about that last time? Or
Oh, big racing fan. Oh, I,
yeah,
I I can't name three players on the Toronto Maple Leafs, but if you want me to recount the Australian Grand Prix that was on 12:30 in the morning
yeah.
the other day, I can lap by lap.
I mean, I do think like this wasn't something I was planning to talk about, but I do think F1 is low key starting to plateau a bit, and I do think that'll be interesting to see. I know they're coming up, or ESPN might not renew those rights, so we'll see what happens there. One other thing that I thought was interesting, even as we were talking about it, we talked about the NHL Four Nations Cup game getting, I think it was 9 or 9.5 million viewers. One of the things that really surprised me from doing that most index was Jeopardy clocks about 9 million viewers a night. Wheel of
Mm-hmm.
Fortune is clocking 9 million, whatever it is, viewers a night. And these are just powerhouses on TV. That's, more than any NBA regular season game or most NBA regular season games or NHL regular seasons games. And just really fascinating to see that these game shows that have been around for whatever it is, 40, 50 years are still retaining so much viewership on TV. And so I thought that was super interesting to just keep in mind. As a marketer, as a media buyer, probably two overlooked properties when it comes to their reach. But the things that two things. One thing I got wrong was the Reddit IPO. I thought that was going to be a huge flop. I was really out on it. It was like my Scott Galloway moment of like, I'm calling it. And it went completely the other way. I did not foresee this AI opportunity they've tapped into in licensing that content and their content, honestly, the user's content to AI companies, getting more favorable search results from Google because of their partnership from Google. Didn't see any of that coming. And the reason I didn't is because it's just because of my experience as a media buyer with Reddit. I've seen results that I've always thought were less than I expected. I think the pitch of Reddit as a marketer makes sense. You get a lot of great contextual data. You get to tap into a lot of great, rich conversations around a lot of passionate people. It's also unduplicated reach from other social platforms. Redditors don't always find themselves on the other platforms. It enables you to get in front of perhaps a more male audience for certain brands. And so all those things together really made it interesting, especially, when you work on a finance brand, when you work on a sports brand, it becomes a really interesting property. But what I have always found from working with Reddit in those campaigns, and this is where I get hit up from the Reddit reps after this saying, what the hell, man? Why'd you say that? Is, the results off platform are people clicking out that, bounce very quickly from the pages they go to. And I don't want to judge all digital media from that because, that's feeding into the narrative that clicks are everything. Click-through rate is everything. But what I have found is that Redditors like being on Reddit. They like engaging on Reddit with other people, not necessarily with brands. The ads on Reddit turn comments off. And so I thought Reddit always should have leaned into spunky activations, creative activations, really interesting ways for brands to show up versus just being another platform to buy direct response marketing on, to buy auction-based advertising on. But that's the path they've really focused on and they've chosen for the most part. They still have Karma Lab, which is their creative studio, and they do definitely have some opportunities for brands, but they've leaned way more into that. I just didn't see it. I also didn't see it because, I think I underrated. I think, by the way, one thing I think is interesting is I think when you see Google and Meta budgets slow down, a lot of people will say that's a bad thing for the ad industry. They'll say, oh my God, the two bellwethers of the industry are seeing declines. And I think last Q3, it wasn't declines. It was just like slightly less than before, which is still billions of dollars in increase in ad spend and double-digit growth. But actually what it means to me is that the test budgets are going up. The experimental budgets are going up. Brands are
Okay.
more willing or interested in trying Snap, Pinterest, Reddit. And I think Reddit's a big beneficiary when the ad economy is good, when brands want to try new things, when they have the budgets to try new things. And I probably underrated that a little bit last year as well. But I will say this, and maybe we'll do a third time. It'll be like SNL. I'll get the third jacket or whatever, and I'll come back on Media People podcast. But I'm doubling down on the Reddit prediction.
Okay.
And I only say that because, if you look at their last earnings, U.S. user growth was flat, if not a little bit down, in Q4, nonetheless, which is, supposedly a really busy time. Average revenue per user was up, which I thought was interesting. And on one hand, that's awesome for Reddit, right? You're able to monetize users better. It could be that users are engaging more on the platform. It's that they're able to serve more relevant ads to those users. But it could just be they're charging more. They're charging advertisers more. They're raising CPMs. And so I think that's interesting. If you think about Reddit, are they really growing their users and growing their engagement? They had those blackouts a couple of years ago, or are they just getting advertisers to pay more because Reddit is a, more of a sexy brand to try and test? So this is no ill will towards Reddit, only other than I'm doubling down. I think it might happen, and we'll see what happens in 2025.
Are there any other platforms or solutions or programs or events that you're bullish on for 2025? Or that
I
at
was
least you've got your eye on?
Yeah, I'm always looking at the streaming space. As you said, the fast stuff. I was wrong about Tubi too. So believe me, I've been wrong before. Roku Channel 2 is something that surprised me that they grew. And again, we're talking about services that make up a small portion of viewing time on television. So I don't want to overrate the importance of some of these metrics and stats. And I think a lot of marketers are guilty of doing that with CTV. A lot of money's flowing into CTV for not a lot of time spent relative to also what's ad supported time spent. And so I think that when you think about CTV, YouTube is the number one streaming service per Nielsen gauge. And a lot of people don't expect that. So, but I will say is Roku Channel doubled their viewing time spent from December 2023 to 2024. I think that's really interesting. I think Roku continues to be an interesting partner that I think has a lot of not only great data, but is increasing their inventory access as well. But Paramount Plus, if I'm being totally honest, and I only say that because I hear a lot about Paramount Plus in my world. Like I have people constantly asking me if I've seen Landman. I have people constantly
Never heard of it.
asking
And
me.
we get Paramount Plus up here.
Sure. Yeah. I have people constantly asking me if they've seen Lioness, or I think that's another show. And then 1923 just came out on T-Vision's streaming rankings, which they're a measurement company that looks at reach and attention for CTV or streaming TV. 1923 was the number one show in this past week. And so I think when you think about Paramount Plus, it's really interesting because I was listening to a podcast recently with it's called The Town. I'm sorry to plug other podcasts while I'm on your podcast.
All
but
good.
It's called The Town. You should listen to it too. It's with Matt Bellany from Puck and The Ringer, and Bella Bajaria, who's I believe the CCO of Netflix. And he asked her, he goes, what are the two properties that you are the most jealous of that you would love to bring over to Netflix? And I think her answer is amazing because she has the data, right? Her answer probably means this is what a lot of people are interested in watching. One of them was Jurassic Park, which I thought was really interesting, and that kind of makes sense. My nephew loves Jurassic Park. I think there's a lot of movies and probably a lot of rich stuff you can do with dinosaurs and that whole property. And the other was Yellowstone, and it is a show that reaches a lot of different people. A lot of people are interested in it, probably in markets that aren't just the typical coastal cities. And I'm curious about Paramount Plus. They also increased their viewing time spent, I think about 50% year over year, and that's a service you hear a lot about as like also ran. I also saw something that SpongeBob SquarePants makes up 10% of viewing on Paramount Plus, but that's
Really?
not unique to them. I saw something last year that Bluey makes up 29% of Disney Plus viewing, and I know I'm rambling a bit, all the stuff that we're talking about, but one of the other things I was really surprised about was how big kids content is in media today. Honestly, I think it was 7 of the top 10 YouTube channels are kids related. If you look at the top movies, it's a lot of PG and G films. And so I just can't help but wonder how much of this media that we're buying, whether we know it or not, is reaching the people we think it is reaching kids, is mostly in co-viewing moments. And it's just something I'm thinking about, something I'm trying to get smarter on myself.
I heard something about Paramount Plus today, and I could get this completely wrong. It was on LinkedIn, and it's an entertainment lawyer based out of California that I follow. And I'm going to tag you on some of his posts just so you can see what he's talking
Please
about.
do.
Because I think you guys talk a lot about the same things. And I'm pretty sure it was him who called out the Halo TV show. Apparently, it was Paramount Plus who did it, and it flopped. And then it got picked up by Netflix. Now,
Okay.
they're not making, I don't believe they're making subsequent seasons, but they just picked it up because that's what happens, kind of like the new version of syndication now. And apparently it was doing gangbusters on Netflix. And I think internationally as well, too. So it's kind of like, was it just on the wrong platform? Is it going to pick up life elsewhere? And basically the whole cusp of his post was just because something was put out on a certain platform and it fails doesn't mean it's an actual failure. It could just be in front of the wrong audience. And when you think about it, like in the US, if you had to rank all of the paid, the subscription-based streaming services, where does Paramount Plus rank?
Yeah. So in time spent, it's towards the bottom. Like it's, Disney Plus has more time spent, Hulu has more time spent, Prime Video has more time spent. I think Max and Peacock are a bit neck and neck, but I believe Tubi and Roku channel have more time spent. And so it is, I think some of that is the bubble I'm in or the people I'm around or what they're interested in. I think to your point, a lot of these services still, don't have a lot of subscribers or subscribers relative to cable or, especially ad supported subscribers. And I think that's the biggest point. The ability for a brand to get involved with and sponsor is either unavailable because it's an Apple TV Plus and you can't just sponsor the next season of Severance. It's small and it's expensive. I've said this in the past, but I think a lot of streaming services have asked brands to pay for their experiments, to pay that $50, $60 CPM to be able to keep the streaming service and their investment in original content going, because someone has to pay for it. And the consumer's paying for some of it, but brands are being asked to pay for a lot of it. And the value prop really hasn't made too much sense. But I still think going direct to those services beats programmatically buying in most instances. And I think having that direct relationship and getting the inventory you want is so important in 2025, because I think a lot of the time, and this is something I learned earlier this year, I documented all the ads I looked at for, I think it was a week. And I remembered, I think I saw anywhere from 700 to 800 ads. I remembered 2 of them. One was an out-of-home ad. The other was in the Kelsey podcast, just because I was checking it out. And what that taught me was 3 things. One, context is so important. If you don't think context is important when you serve ads or when you remember ads, you're wrong. It's so important in getting someone to retain information. The second is personalization is lazy. If you think you can just influence someone by reaching the right person, that's a third of the battle, maybe half, maybe even less than that. It's not about just reaching the right person. It's doing it in a format they pay attention to. It's doing it with creative that's meaningful. And then the last thing I learned is just how many ads I saw, or just how few windows I had to see those ads. I feel like just in the morning and coming home at night, and then I was just bombarded. It was like an onslaught. It was like podcast ad here, out-of-home ad here, banner ad here. And so, you're not necessarily competing with other brands in your category. You're competing with brands in these very finite windows of like 6 to 7 p.m. and 8 to 9 a.m. And so you have to think about how you're going to stand out against them, not necessarily how you're going to stand out against your competitors. So I think all in all, context is really important. And I know I started from like, where's Paramount Plus ranked to get there, but
it's all good. No worries. Yeah. No, it's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of people are very critical about how these platforms and access to media has really crushed our attention spans. And by crushing our attention spans, we really have no attention spans for ads altogether. And it's easy to say, oh, banner blindness. It's not just that. It's like you said you documented 700 ads that you saw and you could only remember 2 of them.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much banner blindness as like this gives you, and that's my daughter, by the way, but this gives you blindness, right? And I think, I'll be on the subway, and I think historically we've said, and I still think it's true to some extent, that like, the subway in New York City is such a high dwell medium. You're on the subway for 20 minutes, you're staring at those boards. A lot of people are staring at their phones. They're playing games or listening to podcasts. Sometimes those services don't even have ads in them because you're paying to get out of ads. And so I think to your point, the attention spans are short, and it's more than just, not paying attention to banners so much as putting things in front of your face that blind you from other ads or other things in your experience.
Okay, so a client comes to you with budget for the Super Bowl, and the budget is completely outside of their regular media spend. Do you advise them to move forward, or would you advise them to do something different with it? Maybe you've got a different idea that's going to extend value beyond the 30 seconds they're going to get in the big game.
Yeah, I think the first thing I ask a client is why. Why do you want to do this? It's such a big investment. You have to have a clear reason why you want to do the Super Bowl. Is it most of your business happens in Q1 and you really need to make that quarter work as hard as possible? Are you going for a new positioning and people think of you for one thing, and this would really do such a big job and on such a big scale of showing that you're for something else? Is it that you are at an inflection point? You've tapped out whatever marketing channels or approaches you have. So getting very quickly to that answer, because if there's not a clear answer to that, then I don't think we should do it, because we need to really address that challenge. I'd also think it'd be foolish to say it's just a media decision. Really tapping into and understanding what the creative ambition is so important. Even just 30 seconds costs $8 million in the Super Bowl. And if there's not a clear, right. And that doesn't include for a match spend commitment that networks make you pay in other programming that they have. So they make you pay another $8 million. It doesn't include the media you have to or typically run in January to promote that spot. And there's all these others. So before you know it, it's 20-25 million dollars to promote your Super Bowl spot, or even afterwards. So really understanding the creative ambition. Then I try to understand what that company's revenue looks like. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I think I recently did some work to say that the median revenue for a new brand in the Super Bowl in 2025 was about 2.5 billion. So if you figure about 10% of their budget or revenue is in marketing budget, that's $250 million. That means the Super Bowl plus the match spend and all those different components should probably be anywhere from 5 to 10% of your budget. But if all your money is going to the Super Bowl, that might not be the best decision. And then finally, I think it's about, where are you going to run? I think there's so much great measurement out there at this point. That's another benefit of being in the Super Bowl. You get all this free measurement, and people respond instantly. So you definitely know how it did. But all these different research companies are doing white papers and measurement about your spot, or about your presence. But again, I think, where are you running in the game? I think, there's enough research to say that 6 to 8 p.m. is kind of that sweet spot. Are you going to promote it before the game? Typically, we've seen in my experience with Super Bowl campaigns, a huge jolt on the day of dissipates quickly. So are you really promoting it? Are you really getting the bang for buck you need? Those are all questions I would ask and kind of consider. And also, are you a brand doing it for the first time? Because I think research goes both ways, but I've seen research for sure say that the most memorable brands, I'm curious, the brands you remember the most from this Super Bowl, some of the most memorable brands are brands you already know of. So a couple of years ago, the Farmer's Dog ran a fantastic spot in the Super Bowl. They won USA Today ad meter, but then Morning Consult came out with research that they weren't in the top 10 of most loved ads. And I asked Morning Consult, why was that? And it's because they just had low recall or lower recall in general than the other brands. Less people associated that brand with that spot. And so if you're going to spend all this money to not even get recalled because your brand hasn't done the necessary work to do that, it defeats the purpose, even if you think the Super Bowl is a big stage to launch your brand on.
What would you say to a movie company that's dropping an advanced spot in the Super Bowl? Because there used to be a lot of hype around that prior to that, but I feel like you can get just as much traction if you uploaded it to YouTube that day.
Yeah, I have an idea to instead of spending $8 million on a 30-second Super Bowl commercial ad space, you just spend $8 million on a commercial and upload it to YouTube and just make it the best commercial, or in what you're talking about, the best trailer that's ever been done. I think there's some really clever ways to do that. I still think it's such a big audience, and a big audience that's expecting spectacle and exciting news. So if you're dropping a new season of a huge show or a hotly anticipated movie, it's going to resonate. But to your point, I think there's a lot of clever ways to think about how to get the bang for buck with Super Bowl without investing in the big game.
See, what I remember most about the Super Bowl, and I'm not a football fan, is actually Kendrick Lamar's halftime show.
Yep.
Where
So
it was really about him sticking it to Drake for like 20 minutes.
yeah, so and there's been a lot of research out there, but the highest attention of the Super Bowl is typically right before the halftime show starts. So if you're a brand, you might be like, we got to be in the fourth quarter because that's when the game might be at its highest peak, or let's be in the first quarter because that's when the game really tips off and there's energy. But if you're right before halftime, if you're people like you that are excited about Kendrick or whatever other performer, you might be getting the most reach and potentially engagement too.
I wouldn't say I was like overtly excited about it. It's just after it was done, it was just like, oh, that was like a giant rap battle or a passive
I'm gonna be
one-sided
honest.
rap battle more than anything else.
I'm gonna sell myself out here, but I'm not a big Kendrick guy. I'm not, for me, I was like, this is cool. I feel like I learned more after, and there were all these
Yes.
podcasts leading up, being like, this is what you should look out for in the Super Bowl, and then my wife was like, well, Serena Williams used to date Drake, and I was like, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I was just like,
Perhaps
really?
I'm not in the culture, but
Were you doing a double take when she popped up? Were you just like, I think that's Serena Williams just like
I
dancing
didn't
off
double
into the
take so much
corner?
as I was certain it was Serena Williams, and I think I talked to some of my friends that were like, that's Serena Williams, and they said that to their spouse or someone. They were like, no, it's not. It can't be her. And so I think a lot of people were confused. I think for people that are really in this this whatever it is, like war, there was so much attention to detail that as anyone I was jealous of just like how what lengths they went to embody every single part of this debate or whatever it is. But I knew it was Serena Williams. I could assure you that.
I think that carried over more than anything else to the Super Bowl. Did you watch the Oscars a couple weeks later?
I did. Did you?
So yeah, I did. So when Conan O'Brien came out, and we can't use the P word that he used on YouTube, but basically he came out and he's like, we're halfway through the Oscars, which means it's time for Kendrick Lamar to come out and call Drake a you know what.
Yes.
And I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
in
I thought
stitches about
Conan was
that.
great, and I
Oh,
thought,
he was fantastic.
yeah, I thought he was really good. And the Oscars too surprised me because I put up a post like trying to get to the Oscar ratings. I did okay. I did okay. I think I predicted 19.9 and it was 19.7. So shout out to me. Great.
Yeah, no, you were in
Yeah,
within that window. I remember
yeah.
that post very much.
But I
I
think
hope I hope the
go
Oscars
for it.
carry on though. Like I enjoy watching them. I like the Golden Globes a little bit more simply because they
So
give
do I.
comedy its due. I don't
Yeah,
like how comedy's isolated, or it has to be a dark comedy, which isn't really ha funny if it's going to get captured by the Oscars. I like that comedy gets its own separate credit.
I like Golden Globes too because it's both TV and movies, and I love
Yes.
both. So it's very cool to see that. It definitely is like more fun. It's also like the first Sunday of the year, so there's this like
Mhm.
new feeling to the year, and it's like, all right, we're gonna see some celebrities. This is amazing. It's usually after or during a football Sunday, so there's some other stuff going on.
There's a
The
lot more
Oscars,
recency to it as well too, because a lot of
yeah,
those movies and shows were just on television or in cinema, like maybe 6 weeks prior to that. So it's like fresh
such a
in your
good point.
mind. Yeah.
Such a good point. And it's also because, these it's not so much anymore where these TV shows have such a set cycle. There could have been a hot TV show that came out pretty recently too that's showcase like it was weird to keep hearing about Shogun, but there were other shows that, were in contention for Golden Globes that were pretty quick or had run pretty recently. So I completely agree with you.
That's funny that you bring that up about shows dropping whenever they do now, and like not having that rigid schedule. Because I remember when I think it was the final season of Succession when people were trying to predict when it was going to drop. One of the pundits that I was following said that if they want to qualify for award season in this year, they've got to drop the episodes by this time. And they were right.
Right.
That's
Right.
exactly what they did because they wanted to qualify for award season rather than it being forgotten for an entire year. And that does happen a lot. The only time I can think of a movie or a TV show that kind of came full circle back at the Oscars was the Grand Budapest Hotel. Like I remember that being like a March or an April release, and then
Right.
literally like 12 months later was winning its awards.
Yeah, it's funny because like Dune Part 2 came out earlier last year, and yeah, that didn't have as much of the runway as other movies, but um, yeah, I completely agree.
I was pulling for Demi Moore.
Yeah, I didn't see Anora, and so my wife and our families do an Oscar pool, and
Mm.
2 years reigning because I took a chance on Mikey Madison, but The Substance was amazing. What was your favorite movie of the year? I'm just curious.
Oh, geez, from the last year. Oh God, I want to say, and this is a bit of a cop out. It's a popcorn movie. My wife and I saw it twice at the drive-in because usually at the drive-in they've got two or three movies running back to back. I want to say that I enjoyed Twisters.
Oh yeah, so did I. We
I
saw it in
enjoy.
IMAX.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it was. I thought it was a good sequel.
Glenn
If you
Powell
can,
fan.
yeah, I like Glenn Powell. I do. Like what I really enjoyed about the film was is that it touched on the legacy of the first one, but it didn't handcuff itself to it too much, where it had to be like this sort of direct sequel.
Yeah,
And so it kind of stood on its own. So I enjoyed that one. I'd
yeah.
say. I mean, we saw Wicked at the drive-in as well too.
Oh,
And
the movie was great.
you know what I liked about Wicked is that they built proper sets. Like I think that art
Sure.
form is dying quite a bit. Like especially when you watch the behind the scenes of if you're looking for a fun one, they do it for Star Wars and even the Batman. Have you ever heard of the Volume?
No.
The Volume is where it's the name of the studio where they take these bezel-less LED screens and put them all together. And rather than having a green screen and then they add it back in after, you've got the background. And it looks absolutely amazing what they do. But I hate that the actual sets aren't built. Like you get a little bit of the
Sure.
groundwork, but everything else in the background, the horizon, that's just not there. So it was nice to see that in Wicked.
Yeah.
There was another one too. Oh God, I forget the name. I think it's Speak No Evil. It's James
Okay.
McAvoy film. It was based on a Danish. It's a horror film based on a Danish film, and I can't say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it or anything else. But it's a really, really good psychological thriller and horror. That's another good one if you're into horror films as well too. So check that one out. That
Yeah,
was
I
a
got it.
good one.
Yeah, there's a couple movies I still need to see. I mean, I saw A Complete Unknown, which I thought was fine. I thought I actually liked The Brutalist. I know it was 3 hours, but we did it. I watched that. I joked to my wife we were going to watch The Brutalist in 6 parts, 6 30-minute episodes. That's what being a dad's all about. A new dad. But
That's how you got to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League.
yeah, one thing on the TV point, I'm curious if you've picked this up too, because the shows that are out right now, like I'm surprised just how diverse. Like there's so many top shows across so many different streaming services, and now I have this theory that like are these companies just like avoiding the NFL? And it's like at this point, we're just going to wait till the Super Bowl ends and we're just going to drop our biggest shows. And so I feel like that way about White Lotus. I feel like that way was like kind of like it was with Severance. I don't know if you've picked up on that too, but it just feels like it's been a richer time of year for TV shows. And maybe it's because like the big movies don't come out till later, but curious what you think about that.
I would agree with that. Here's a bit of insight I can give you from a sporting perspective in the NFL. So IndyCar renegotiated their TV rights deal with Fox this year, and they doubled down on the fact that they do not want to overlap with the NFL. So their final race of the season is either the weekend before the NFL kickoff or it's the same weekend as the NFL kickoff. But after that, they're completely done. And then NASCAR starts their season literally they start with a preseason race for that bye weekend that the NFL has. You know how there's that gap for the Pro Bowl? They will say, fuck it, we're going to go up against the Pro Bowl. And then they start the weekend. The Daytona 500 is after the Super Bowl. But with wind of the NFL expanding their season a little bit more, NASCAR has come forward and said that we might have to back up the Daytona 500 because of that. So it's not just it's weird too when you bring up other shows doing that as well too, because I could see that happening back in the day. Like one that just popped into mind, it's very random, is I remember that American Dad debuted right after the Super Bowl.
Well, lead out show, yeah.
It was a lead out show, but like that's what it was, is that but they waited. They could have started that in the fall. They could have started that in January when everyone got back, but they waited until February to do that. But I am seeing that with some of the other shows as well too. Like, and it's kind of funny because it is still a little scattered. Like the White Lotus right now, like you mentioned, has got that coveted 9 p.m. spot on HBO. Right. Whereas the Gilded Age should have had that spot leading into and overlapping with football. But the Gilded Age, whenever they do make season 3, and my wife's a big fan of that show, and I watch it by proxy. She loves that show completely. But she's waiting for season 3. But who knows when that's going to drop, because the White Lotus, which was traditionally a summer show, I believe. I think the first 2 seasons happened in the summer.
Yes, I think you're right.
And so they moved this one around. So it's funny because programming is a lot more movable than it was before. You can just drop it whenever you want, and that's what it is. Like, are you watching any of the Marvel stuff on Disney Plus?
We did a couple years ago. Like when we watched the Marvel movies over COVID. I was going to say that one of the things I'm looking forward to most this year is the Fantastic Four. Like I'm psyched, and I
really?
think that I'm if that doesn't go well, I think it's like kind of over, right? Like what's your prognosis? I mean,
you're going down quite the rabbit hole with me. So my whole prognosis on this is, I think the Thunderbolts are going to save the MCU.
Okay,
I think
like that.
I think the Thunderbolts, because the Thunderbolts are drawn on characters that you can connect back to the original phase 1 of the MCU. The way I equate the MCU is kind of like to Star Wars, where every Star Wars trilogy has its own generation. The problem with the MCU is that it's not separated by vast periods of time where people can take a break and enjoy it. It's all of a sudden, it's like, I really enjoyed that. And then a year later, you get a movie that you don't like, and then another movie you don't like. And all of a sudden, it seems to have tarnished everything beforehand. Whereas you had time to let that other stuff age properly. So I think the Thunderbolts, because you've got a Black Widow in there connected back to Scarlett Johansson's character.
Sure, right.
Bucky's in it as well too.
IP, right. You got
every one of them is part of a previous phase.
David Harbour's character, you got it,
And then now they're introducing the Sentry as well too. That is, God, he's the son of a famous actor. He played the president in Independence Day. He was also in Top Gun Maverick with Glenn Powell and everyone else. You know who I'm talking about?
Miles Teller?
No, not Miles Teller. Miles Teller would never play this insecure superhero, this insecure schizophrenic superhero. So Sentry, his name's Bob. In the trailer, he goes, "My name's Bob," but he's basically the MCU's version of Superman if Superman was schizophrenic.
Lewis Pullman.
That's it. Bill Pullman's son. There we go. Lewis Pullman. And so
I'm excited. I didn't know that.
They're going to introduce him as well too. And it feels like it's going to be their version of the Suicide Squad.
Right.
And
yes.
That's what I like about it.
You're not pumped for Fantastic Four.
You know where they lost me with Fantastic Four? When they said it was going to be in a different reality. I said, no. We've got to stop with this multiverse bullshit. Like, keep it simplified for people, because Like the geeks like me, and can I call you a geek as well too?
Yeah, man, you
Well,
call me
welcome.
obsessed, call me a geek, call me a
You,
nerd, whatever you want.
okay, geeks like us, we're going to go to it. We're going to debate about it like we are right now. There's going to be a lot of banter back and forth about it. But the casual fan, the fan that's going to push this movie over $500 million in box office revenue, push it up to $1 billion in box office revenue, they won't want to be sitting there asking questions about why did this happen? Why did that happen? I don't get this. What's going on here? And if they can't understand it, then they're not going to come back for the sequels. And
I think
then
that's fair. Yeah, I think that the only point is like I think everyone, at least in my world, and maybe this is myopic to my friends, it's like everyone's such a prisoner of Rotten Tomatoes. Like whatever the Rotten Tomato score is, it like almost like allows you, gives you permission to see it or not, or at least to see it in theaters versus like an airplane or like at home viewing experience. And so like I just feel like the last ones have had such bad Rotten Tomato scores, including Captain America Winter Soldier, or not Captain America Winter Soldier, the
Brave
one
New
that
World.
came out. Yeah,
Yeah.
but did you see that one?
I haven't seen that one yet. I'm actually
Yeah.
waiting for it to come to Disney Plus in a
Yeah.
couple of weeks.
So I think Thunderbolts has like the tone, like you've said, like more a comedic tone or edgier tone, but not like so edgy that it's like not MCU. But I think Fantastic Four, and maybe I'm just a sucker because I remember the movies when we were younger, and those were so, and I grew up reading the Fantastic Four comics. But I think as long as that movie has a solid Rotten Tomato score, sky's the limit. I think people will go and see it, and sure, they might be asking more questions than usual. I don't really know what the plot is, but I think they'll be excited about it.
I mean, I want to be optimistic for it. I hope it does work out because there's a lot on this. Like really,
The
right?
cast is good, and they're like a little. I guess like I do think that the kid from Stranger Things probably was more popular a couple years ago when Stranger Things was like out, but Pedro Pascal is like the hottest guy right now.
Yeah, he's in everything. So I
Yeah,
mean, if you want,
got the Last of Us season
yep.
going into that too. Like I don't know.
They should just give him an Oscar for being like you know what he is? He's like the new Samuel L. Jackson. He's like in everything. He might as well just show up in a post-credit scene. You know what I don't like about this Fantastic Four, and they did not learn from Warner Brothers when they brought Michael Keaton back, was bringing Robert Downey Jr. back. I don't think that's going to work. And going back to my argument about creating confusion, you're going to have the casual fan going,
I could agree with that.
Why is Iron Man speaking with like a Latvian or an Eastern European accent? Why doesn't he recognize anyone? I think that's going to be problematic. I think that was a gimmick. And the problem with that gimmick is that it's kind of like saying to yourself internally, we don't trust our own writing and directing. And I think that's very problematic. So, and the problem with Marvel is that if something really works, they seem to double down on it in a bad way. Like the Russo brothers, they did Captain America Winter Soldier. And then after that, it was like, okay, here's Civil War. Here are the next two Avengers films. What else are they doing? They're doing the Avengers films after that as well, Avengers Doom. And they've also got to tie up loose ends with Kang the Conqueror, because that was supposed to be.
I think they're just going to write that off. So not to bring this full circle, my friend, but I think it's that old strategy, new audience, and what got you started, got you stuck. Robert Downey Jr. got you stuck. You need some fresh new ideas. Hire obsessed media, Disney, and
there we go.
Will come some new Marvel storylines. But I think you're right. I think you're right to some extent with the Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom stuff. But we'll see where it goes. People weren't vibing with Kang, and so I'm curious to see how they like address that in the future series.
There's also the controversy with Jonathan Majors, and I think also launching the character through Ant-Man and the Wasp or whatever, Quantumania. I don't think that was a good launch pad. Like if you look at
Loki, to be fair, like they introduced him with Loki.
Yeah, that's true. He did, but he wasn't even Kang. He was He Who Will Not Be Named, and he kept going back to his fax machine, like his fax machine that predicted the future. Here's if Disney's listening, and I hope they are, if they want to make a lot of money, what they need to do is go back and do the Defenders. I don't
know what that is.
The Defenders. So it was part of the whole Netflix series. Did you watch any of the Netflix Marvel shows that were in the MCU, like Daredevil or Jessica Jones?
Right.
The Defenders. There was a time in the comic books where the Defenders had to go underground. It was during the whole Civil War thing, and it was an interesting cast of characters. It was Doctor Strange. Spider-Man was wearing a cloth version of his black suit because he was being hunted, and it was kind of him being moody and brooding. And then you also had Luke Cage. I think you had Daniel Rand, the Iron Fist, and I think you might have had Daredevil in that as well too. And the interesting thing about this was that you had Jessica Jones off to the side, who had had a baby with Luke Cage, and it was like, you've got to stop being a superhero. Like you have a daughter now, and they were all being hunted under the Superhero Registration Act. And in spoiler alert, in the comic, she actually turns herself in and
Okay.
basically offers herself up. Jessica Jones, and was just like, "Hey, I don't want to register as a superhero, but I'm not going to give you a problem." She was basically working out a plea deal. If you give my husband immunity because he's got a daughter, there's going to be no trouble from us. And I
Yeah.
really liked that dynamic between those characters. I think if there's anything we learned from Infinity War and even Endgame, is that when you put these characters in a blender and you have them like mismatch with each other, like you've got Rocket and Bucky, I
Yeah.
think those things start to work out quite a bit. I think people were
Well,
really responsive to that.
I think to your point, you got to build them up. You got to build
Yeah.
identities for them. It's expecting a lot of an audience to your point. If you don't build up the backstory, build up why we should care about them, seeing them in these big set pieces matters way less.
So we can't talk about Marvel without talking about DC, because when I was asking you the Super Bowl question in movie trailers and uploading it to YouTube and it being way more prolific or beneficial and efficient than going straight to the Super Bowl, we got to talk about Superman.
Sure.
What's your opinion on that? We've seen the
I'm
trailer.
excited for that too. I mean, James Gunn is like, I feel like a mastermind with this stuff, and I've seen the trailer. I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to it too. What about you?
I think David Corenswet was a perfect choice. I think he's a lot better than Henry Cavill. I think a lot of people.
Well, that was too serious too, I feel like.
The other thing too is Henry Cavill's a very nice guy, and I think his personal life bled into the fandom a little bit, where people felt sorry for him that he was getting dicked around.
Sure.
But I don't think he was the best Superman, or I don't think he had the best writing. But I'm looking forward to what David Corenswet can do. He did a show on Netflix. God, it was about Hollywood in the 50s. It was basically after, maybe even the late 40s, after World War II, and how there's sort of this boom in Hollywood where everyone is trying to break in. And I thought he was great in that series. I forget what it was called. I think it might have actually been called Hollywood. And I'm looking forward. I think Rachel Brosnahan is fantastic as Lois Lane. And the one thing I really like about the two of them that I got from the trailer was that they have chemistry. Like I didn't think Amy Adams and Henry Cavill had any chemistry. Like you looked at them and you were just like, you guys seem more like brother and sister than you do.
Is that Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor in that one? Is that...
Yeah. I like Jesse Eisenberg, but the whole idea of trying to treat him like a Mark Zuckerberg, instead of him being this sort of wealthy industrialist, he's more of like a wealthy startup tech bro. I didn't like that approach whatsoever.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
So, I mean, it was funny because before the trailer dropped, I said to my wife, one of two things are going to happen. He's either going to lightly tease crypto or he's going to double down on crypto. And he doubled down on crypto. And I went for the comments, and the number of people that were focused on the super dog was incredible. Like he knows how to sell it. Like it's basically like he's lifting the whole idea that people go to social media for pet videos and saying, okay, let's appeal to those people and bring it over here. So I'm curious to see how he works that in further. But no, I am looking forward to it. My only concern would be is that he's not redoing the origin story, which is wonderful. We don't need to hear about the planet blowing up again, but he's got Superman existing in this sort of established universe with other characters. And I know people are going to be leaning into it going, why is Nathan Fillion got a bowl cut? Who's the lady with the wings, and who's the guy with like painted on his face, Mr. Terrific? And I feel like there are going to be a lot of issues there. And that seems to be what the criticisms are, that James Gunn is very good at ensemble films. Again, looking back at The Suicide Squad and all three of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, that's what he's trying to do with Superman. So it might be a bit of a crowded film. And did you watch Creature Commandos? The kickoff? Are you familiar with it?
I'm not.
It's an animated
show. You're going deep now. It's
an animated show.
I've opened the floodgates.
You have. It's an animated show, and it was 5 episodes. James Gunn dropped it just before the holidays, and it is the kickoff to this DC universe. Like cool. David Cornison's, spoiler alert, his Superman is briefly in it as well too, full suit and everything, because James Gunn's approach is going to be, well, you know what, we can have stuff that's animated and live action and tied into the same universe.
Well, I think we have to rename this podcast Marvel People
or comic book people or anything like that. But anyways, look, I know we're going to wind this down a little bit before we get to rapid fire questions, but go watch Daredevil Born Again. I'm 3 episodes in, and I think it's restoring credibility to Marvel's television.
We're going to start off the next podcast we do together with a recap of it.
Then that's going to happen in about 8 weeks. We're just going to go right into it.
Love it.
All right. Okay, before we get to rapid fire questions, a couple of other things I wanted to pick out from some of your LinkedIn posts. You had a really interesting one about streamers having an identity. So let's go through a couple of those. So the first one is Amazon. You think the identity for Amazon is now James Bond.
I think it's action in general, and
Okay.
I haven't watched Reacher.
Oh, you're
And
missing out. It's great.
yeah, that was the other number one show on TVision, or it was last week's number one show. But just a couple of the, I mean, I know they have Lord of the Rings, and I know they have The Boys, but it just feels like they're leaning into like more of these like action oriented shows, and then James Bond's gonna be like the next iteration of that.
Well, I have to say though that even when it was announced a couple weeks ago that they had the full rights to James Bond, they quietly took down every James Bond film they had from Prime. Because I was
Okay.
like, oh, okay, I'd like to watch it. And then boom, it was gone. The only thing that we could watch on Prime was there was a James Bond tribute concert that was wonderfully done in London. And
Yeah.
then there was the kind of like the God, what's the name of that game show, The Great Race? What's it? See, you can tell I don't watch a lot of like standard cable.
The Amazing Race.
Amazing Race. That's a Great Race. Amazing Race. They did a James Bond
It's
themed
great and amazing.
great and amazing. They did a James Bond themed one with Brian Cox narrating it.
Cool.
And that was a pretty good one too. But it started with a tweet from Jeff Bezos asking who should be the next James Bond.
Okay.
So they're
That's
definitely leaning into that. And
yeah, 100%. And I think they're, I mean, they paid what, $7.5 billion for MGM, and they had to pay more
yes,
to Barbara Broccoli to get her out of the way. So I think that
that's
100%
exactly what
makes
they
sense.
did.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Yeah.
they got her out of the way. There was a lot of friction there. And you see Apple TV Plus as sci-fi, and then Paramount. You've got Sheridan next to that.
Yeah.
Elaborate
So that's,
further. Is
well, so
that
that's the Taylor Sheridan.
Taylor
So
Sheridan?
Taylor
Okay.
Sheridan's universe is Yellowstone, 1923. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Paramount Plus does. I know they're talking about bundling with other services, and there's new Paramount owners as well, but I can't help but think it's a little underrated.
Danny, this has been a fantastic chat. Thanks so much for coming back on. We're going to make this an annual thing or continue to make it an annual thing. And you are the first returning guest who's going to
Let's do it.
who's going to do the new rapid fire question. So this is exclusive for returning guests because we can't do the same thing again. So you kind of already answered the first question by showing us your phone, but the wallpaper on your phone.
It's my daughter, and I try to change it every couple couple of months to document just new milestones.
Your favorite travel destination.
I'm not a big traveler, if I'm being totally honest. My wife and I went to Rome last fall, and it was my first time in Europe, which is, I think a lot of people would find that surprising, but it was awesome. It was a really good time. Really liked Italy. It was cool.
Okay, so if you could live anywhere else in the world, where would you live?
Right here. I'm a native New Yorker. I like to joke during COVID, we stuck it out in the city, and they would have had to pry me out of here. We left eventually for a brief stint in LA, which I hated. I really did not like it. So I live right here.
Describe a social media post that you made that garnered a sufficient amount of attention, and that could be personal or professional.
Yeah, I'll keep it professional, and I know we've talked about a lot of the different posts I've had. I brought up one before of all the different ads I saw for a week that got a really strong response, and I think people shared their own stories of what ads they remembered and what they didn't. But one I was looking back that got a lot of response was I put up a post when Starbucks changed CEOs. Brian Nickel came in, and he's made a lot of changes. And what I wrote was just, when a new leader comes into an organization, it's easy to cast blame. It's easy to point fingers and say things aren't good enough and they need to be better. I think leaders need to be a little bit more sensitive to that. And not to say that, you brought in for a specific job, you have to, clean things up, but you also want to inspire the people left to see your vision and see your change. And that got a huge response on LinkedIn, and got like 50,000 impressions. It got a lot of different comments, and we took my daughter to the New York City Marathon, or the New York City Half Marathon this weekend. And, we were at the finish line, and everyone's cheering on these people. They don't even know who they are. And there's crowd interaction. People are waving to the crowd, they're pumping up the crowd, and vice versa. And I'm obsessed, right? I bring everything back to marketing and what I'm doing in my career. And I see that with agencies. That's why our thing is make shit fun. That's why if no one was there at the finish line, some of those people might have quit. They might not have made it. But, if you could pump up the people that are around you, the people you work with day in and day out, to do their best work, even if you're an outsider coming into a new situation, I think that's more important than casting blame and trying to make people feel bad.
If you had to give a TED talk on something, what would the topic be?
I think common sense in your career. And I think that in media and marketing, we try, at Obsessed to apply common sense when it comes to buying, planning, not getting infatuated with shiny objects, but also common sense in yourself. And Barry and I are taking a leap, or have taken a leap by starting this agency, but we think it's, it makes sense to us because we believe in ourselves and our abilities to perform. So I think common sense in your career.
If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Victor, no, I'm kidding. I've thought, I think the answer that I always come back to is like, the Larry Davids of the world, the Dave Matthews of the world, the people that I, like as comedians or like as musicians. I think there's a marketing table that I would have like a separate dinner of marketing talk with like Mark Ritson and David Ogilvy and Bob Hoffman. But I also think that I'd love to have dinner with people who've made big mistakes, if I'm being totally honest. And I don't, especially in the marketing world, but the world at large, just to hear why, what they learned. I'm always, trying to be better and improve myself. And, if you get me in a room with 3 people that have made some mistake, whatever those mistakes are, I would love to learn from them.
And we're going to end things right here. Danny, thanks so much for stopping by, and all the best with Obsessed.
Always, man. Thanks for having me back. Can't wait for the 3rd time,
We'll do it again in a year.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. The 1-year anniversary of Obsessed.
Hell yeah.
All right.